Greetings, welcome to another Deckard Games YouTube thing. It feels like the beat-em up resurgence is in full swing, and I couldn't be happier. Titles such as Streets of Rage 4, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and the recently released Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which you can watch a video here on the channel, are flying the flag for a genre that many argued had reached its heyday back when consoles were measured in bits. If it isn't obvious, I do love a good beat-em up, or brawler if you will, and so along comes Final Vendetta, developed by Bitmap Bureau and published by Numbskull Games for PC and all the contemporary consoles in June of 2022. Final Vendetta is a side-scrolling beat-em-up which feels like the long-lost cousin of Streets of Rage. The pixel art style makes the game look like it was lovingly plucked from the 90s, but the graphics are not the only nostalgic elements pulled from the past. Final Vendetta has a cool set of backing tracks to accompany the melee carnage on the screen. They have also decided to make the game painfully difficult, with no option to continue should you lose all your lives. And Final Vendetta starts with some logos, an intro where a phone rings, letting you know that someone was kidnapped, followed by a familiar start screen where one can choose a 1 or 2 player game, mess with some optional options, learn how to play the game, which is a no-brainer, or exit the game. Starting a new game, the player is given the choice of choosing which character he wants to take control of. There's 3 characters to choose from: Blaze Fielding, Adam Hunter, and Axel Stone, or, in the case of Final Vendetta, Claire Sparks, Duke Sancho, and Mylor T. Williams. I get it that sometimes it can be difficult to be inventive and bring something fresh to this genre and give a nod to its predecessors, but these characters are a little too alike. Although I understand when game developers write a love letter to the past and to the games which have inspired them, I've come to appreciate more inventive approaches with some risk to the mix. And when it comes to the narrative within the game, well, that's about all the story you get, but it's all that you need. Onto the game then. The gameplay will tickle the nostalgic bones of those who remember the Final Fight and Streets of Rage days, as it feels very much like those, although just not as refined. There is something not quite right about the attack reach of your character compared to the enemies. Your character's attack speed just seems a smidgen too slow for my liking, and it leaves you vulnerable too often. The enemy AI is way more switched on too, as they always come from both sides, but luckily you do have a back attack, which is super handy in this game. They've added a block button, which is a rare inclusion in this style of game, but it doesn't help when enemies attack you from both sides. Every character has a normal attack, a back attack, a special attack, and a sort of signature move. Your special attack can be used at any time by pressing the attack and jump buttons at the same time, but at a cost of some health. If you fill up your super bar by hitting enemies, you can then do a special move without losing any health. Your signature move is useful and also does a signature grapple move if you lock up with an enemy by moving into them. The back attack is what it says. It's to hit enemies trying to sneak up on you. The enemies are nicely balanced. Your usual motley crew of big guys, small guys, swift girls, and those who dangerously windmill kick on Wake Up. The enemies in Final Vendetta are relentless, with some having minimal attack wind-ups or wake-up attacks that take a lot of getting used to. While these foes do not need to take much punishment to put down, some can completely throw the player off balance just with a simple light punch that puts the character into a stun position as other enemies can take advantage of this and simply ship the player to death.
Take this!
Couple this character aggression with the beat-em-up genre's trademark stage obstacles, and you have a recipe for frustration. Some stages feature barrels that are flunged at the players with no warning given, meaning that if you find yourself at the right of the screen when they trigger, then you take unforeseen damage that can end the run. The more telegraphed obstacles like the dropping containers and swinging hooks of the dockyard level are not much better, with only a warning triangle flashing in the middle of the screen warning you of the incoming hit, but with no indication as to what you need to do. Contrast this to Streets of Rage 4's Train level, where you get a jump prompt, and it's easy to see why Final Vendetta's approach is harder to appreciate. While the stages are short, the bosses take a little bit longer to figure out and finish, often utilizing a block or some way to stall you, and it's clear the point of this game is all in the replay value. Saying that, I did enjoy the steady increase in enemies' health and the number you face, as eventually I felt a badass taking on hordes of horrible gangs at once. In fairly standard beat-em-up practice, you also find food throughout the level, often by destroying oil barrels or the occasional phone box, and depending on the size of the meal, you regain a nice little chunk of your health. Jewelry is also hidden around, adding to your high score, which you can proudly display at the end of your run, and occasionally you find the odd weapon on the floor to turn the tables on the Syndicate forces, a knife, cricket bat, katana, and a few more options. These are always fun to experiment with, but you lose them if you take a single lick of damage. Given how quickly foes can surround you, this means that most weapons don't last long enough for you to enjoy them. Likewise, the bosses in Final Vendetta are all a joy. With a nice variety of different sizes and strategies, the bosses kept me on my toes and felt like a fitting challenge. Final Vendetta feels great to play, and there are a few fun ways that it lets you make the most of this through its runtime. What really shines in Final Vendetta for me is the overall presentation, including the excellent soundtrack. The pixelated visuals are reminiscent of the finer works from the 16-bit era, combining those XL sprites from Final Fight with the animation quality of Streets of Rage beautifully. Taking cues from the thumping house of the 90s and the classic games of the time, Final Vendetta's soundtrack, for want of a better term, absolutely slaps, and has original soundtracks from Utah Saints that blew me away. It's perfect for this high-energy title and lifts up the game with a barrage of techno beats that give every moment the energy it deserves. Final Vendetta does a capable job of using and enhancing a tried and tested formula of the past, and is great fun for either one or two players. Its briefness is amended by its single credit format, a bold but welcome move that makes learning to clear it rewarding for all the right reasons. But nonetheless, it is a setup some may struggle with. There's still room for experimentation in this genre with regard to original systems, and sadly, Final Vendetta doesn't really attempt any of that. Instead, opting for a more traditional 90s arcade fare, although with lots of variation on how you smack people around. If that is enough to tickle your pickle, you will feel well served by Bitmap Bureau's attempt, but others might feel like they've walked these streets of rage before. And as long as you are here, why not check the other videos on the channel? There's plenty of those which hopefully you can enjoy. Speaking of enjoyment, if you enjoyed this video, leave it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button because your support is always very much appreciated. Remember that you can follow me on social media if you want to, because following me on the streets of Vendetta will be kind of awkward. As always, thank you very much for watching this, and until my next video, take care.